All right, let's do Module 3. This is chapters 5 and 6. If you will, get your textbook and turn to page 67. We're going to go over some things that are important here. All right, let's go to chapter 5 on page 67. There are some terms that you really need to know. It'll be helpful if you know these. At the very top of the page in blue, phagocytosis. Neutrophils and macrophages engulf and destroy bacteria, cell debris, or foreign matter. So it's like, think of it as like a Pac-Man. Inflammation involves a sequence of events, and interferons are non-specific agents to protect uninfected cells against viruses. Those are things that you just need to commit to memory. Let's look at the steps of inflammation on page 69. We're going to put this here. It may not belong here. I haven't looked at how many headings there are. I just kind of wanted to discuss this really quickly. So acute inflammation, the pathophysiology behind it. So if you were to be asked to put this in 1, 2, 3 order. So first, number 1, you would have transient, can't spell, vasoconstriction. And then there's a rapid release of chemical mediators, and that results in local vasodilation. Vessels enlarged. Because of these vessels that have enlarged, we have hyperemia. The area is red. The blood is going to that area, so it's going to be red and warm to touch, right? Because of that increased blood flow. And as a direct result of that, there is increased capillary membrane permeability. I can't talk and type at the same time. Okay, so that's number 4. And then that increases proteins to move into the space with more fluid. At this point, you have toxic material at the site, and the globulins serve as antibodies. They can form fibrin mesh, but the last one you need to look at, the last step, would be on down in the next paragraph, where it talks about several chemical mediators at the site act as a potent stimuli to attract leukocytes. So that's your last step. It attracts leukocytes. So there are your 5 in 1, 2, 3 order steps to acute inflammation. But while you're doing this, if you don't know what vasoconstriction means or hyperemia, look those up and put them to the side. What is a leukocyte and why does it attract it? Well, look at the next page on page 70, table 5.2. It has the function of these cellular elements. The leukocytes include neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils, and it tells you their activity. So the neutrophils are phagocytosis of microorganisms. They're little Pac-Mans. The basophils released histamine. That's what causes inflammation. And the eosinophils are increased when you have an allergic response of some sort. So take a look at each term. If you don't know what they mean, it will help you out tremendously. Now let's move on to page, let me look here. Page 75. First aid measures. Most of you know this. This is common sense. You have, I don't know which headline it should go under. I'm just kind of giving you some 411 here. Rice. If you've ever sprained anything, injured something, you're going to see this from your ER physician. Rest, ice, compression, and elevation. We want to do this early on. This is going to help decrease the edema and the pain. We sometimes will use hot and cold alternately, and it just kind of depends on what kind of injury it actually is. All right, I'm backtracking a little bit. Go to page 70, 70 and 71. Know the difference between a local effect and a systemic effect. Local is exactly like it sounds. It's going to be things that you can touch, you can feel, you can see. So redness, warmth, pain. Um, Also, those terminology in blue on the right side of the page there on page 70, know what exudate is. Know how to differentiate between serous, fibrinous, purulent, or an abscess. Those are important to know the differences between those. Systemic effects, on the other hand, are general manifestations. These are because of the inflammation, and you're going to have mild fever, malaise, fatigue, headache, and anorexia. Again, if you don't know what those terms are, look them up. All right, one more concept I want to talk to you about in chapter 5 on page 83. And this has to do with burns. This is not the only thing you need to know, but it's just something I want you to understand. So, page 83. Once there are severe burns, you're going to have hypermetabolism. And this is going to be during the healing period after a burn, and it is where there's increased dietary need for protein and carbohydrates. There's also heat loss because the skin, the layer is damaged. They have a really difficult time maintaining their body temperature. So these are just some things that I want you to know about burns. Go ahead and look over the rest of chapter 5 and chapter 6 and do your evolve activities and get this quiz done.